Everybody, today I am bringing you my September wrap up. But before I do, two little points to note. Firstly, my computer's being very strange with uploading my videos at the moment. It doesn't seem to be connecting to my phone, and so yeah, I don't really know when I'm going to get this video to you, let alone others. I think I'm pretty much just going to have to try it every day and see if it wants to do it today. I don't know why it's doing that. And two, I am moving out in 2 weeks, so everything's going to be a bit up in air, and again, I might disappear for a little while. Yes, I know, I've just come back. What can I say? Life. So, getting on with this. Firstly, this month I read Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine. I've already done a review of this, which I will link down below. But needless to say, I absolutely loved it. It is the story of a summer in Illinois, basically, and it follows these two children on their summer holidays and the people around the street and the things that happen, and it's just really gorgeous, like really different for me. It's kind of more sort of little snippets of life rather than an ongoing narrative, but it was just lovely, beautifully written. I actually read some out in my review as well, so definitely check it out if you're interested. Then I read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Now, I was watching the film of this with my boyfriend, and he basically said, you have to read the book, it's so much better, blah, blah, blah. So, he shoved this at me, and it was alright. It's very, very different from the film, and I am surprised that the film chose to use the name I Am Legend. It is that different. It's basically, they used the brief, broad concept and completely changed it. So, yeah, strange. But, I mean, this is worth a read as well. It's basically a vampire novel. If you haven't seen the film, it is about this man who basically everyone in the world has sort of become infected with vampirism, and everybody's turned into vampires apart from this guy who for some reason is avoiding the disease. I think it does say in the end why, but I can't remember. But he's immune, and he sort of every night has to like hole himself in his house and sort of hide from all the vampires. And it's interesting. It's basically just about how he survived. He sort of starts trying to work out what causes the vampirism, and it goes into sort of the biology of it, which is quite good because it adds a real essence of realism of why would people become vampires. Obviously it's very short and so very brief in everything, but it was good enough. Nice little novel, didn't take long to read, and it's quite interesting. It's good as well to see how different it is from the film. Then I read The Importance of Being Earnest and Other Plays by Oscar Wilde. I was very sceptical about reading this because I've never read a play, but I was going to see The Importance of Being Earnest at Bath Royal Theatre. Last week I saw it, so I thought I'd better read it first, just so I sort of know and can picture it in my head and blah blah blah. And actually I really enjoyed reading these. It's strange, once you start reading you completely forget the fact that you're reading a play. It's just a really quick novel, basically. I don't know why they were so quick to read. I suppose because it cuts out all the description and stuff. You just get the stage directions, which are enough to give you an indication of where everyone is and what the place setting is. And yeah, it was just really enjoyable. There was one play in here that I didn't like so much, Shalom, and The Importance of Being Earnest. I didn't love the play. I thought it was quite funny and quite witty, but a bit lacking. But there was one in the middle, Lady Windermere's Fan, which I absolutely loved. And by the way, the play I went to see of The Importance of Being Earnest was really good, really funny. It's the one with, what's his name? No, Nigel Havers in it. I think they're touring at the moment. So if you're thinking about going to see that, I would definitely recommend it. Although I did notice I was the only young person in the audience. I looked behind me and it was all grey-haired people. I don't know whether that's because the cast was all sort of older actors. But I was a bit like, oh. Anyway, then I read Because It Is Bitter and Because It Is My Heart by Joyce Carol Oates. Now, I'm not going to lie, I picked this up solely because of the gorgeous title. Still stand by my decision because of the gorgeous title. This is quite a slow read, quite a literary novel. I've never read Joyce Carol Oates before, and so it was good to read a bit of her. And I definitely will be reading more. It's not necessarily what I hoped it was going to be, but it was still good. It's basically... It's hard to explain. It's this girl Iris and this black boy, I can't remember what he's called, Jinx, and it's in the 50s, so obviously race issues are still quite rife and the races sort of stay apart from each other. Although I was surprised, I don't know the timeline of sort of racism and things like that, but I was surprised that it's not necessarily racist anymore, and people were still being quite wary of saying, do we say coloured or black, or you know, they were being tactful with it, but there was still very much a divide. You know, black people didn't mix with white people and they stayed in their own streets, sort of thing. And basically what happens is that in the beginning we learn that there's been a murder, and I will tell you because it says on the back, Jinx Fairchild is responsible for this murder, and Iris is in love with him and she sort of helps him cover it up, etc, etc. And it's not necessarily about the event. I think that's what sort of threw me as I was reading it. It's not about the event. The event happens and then we go on to see how it shaped their lives, I suppose, but it doesn't really come into things very much, if you know what I mean. It's sort of there in the background, but it's not about that predominant event. So it's just literally mainly about Iris's life, actually, which I think bothered me, because up to about halfway, 3/4 of the way through, you're sort of alternating between Jinx and Iris, and then it becomes solely about Iris, and Jinx just kind of pops up. And it's like, I kind of liked both of the storylines. I wanted to know where both of them were going. But anyway, yeah, it's worth a read, and I'd say I definitely am going to read more of hers. It's a very interesting take on things, and it was a nice read, and that's all I can say, really. Then I read A Stir Calm Kiss by Susan Price, and this is the second in a series. I think there's only 2, and the first one is A Stir Calm Handshake, which I actually bought when I was 13 years old and never got around to reading until last year, and I loved it. So I read this one. I'm not actually sure if they're in print anymore, because I only had the Stir Calm Handshake up until last year, and after I read that I obviously wanted to get this one, and I had quite a hard time finding this one. Obviously I got it in hardback in the end. As you can see, there were stickers all over it. It was just in a bargain basement thing. I think it actually came from America, but yeah, I had quite a hard time finding it, so I don't know whether they're actually still in circulation or whatever, but I'm sure if you want to, you can pick it up second hand or sort of just Amazon it, because that's how I did it, and I found this eventually. Took a while, but I did. So yes, the basic premise of these books is that it's quite an interesting take on life, really. There's a tube which can transport you to the 16th century, and this is 21st side. So people working for this company go through this tube and try and find out stuff about the Stir Calm family who live in the 16th side. I think, from what I can recall, they're doing this for money purposes and to make use of the land and the resources. We predominantly, in the first book, follow Andrea, who is living with the Stir Calms. She's sort of integrated herself into the family. She's in a relationship with their youngest son, or their son. I don't know if he's the youngest. And yes, so we follow her in the first book. Basically, I'm not going to tell you what this is about because it ruins the end of the first book. But the first book's really enjoyable, really unique, and it's really interesting, sort of flitting from sides. At one point, I think it's Pear, the son, who gets injured, and he goes into a hospital on 21st side, and, you know, it's absolutely insane, like alien behaviour for him. And that's a really good scene. And yeah, it's just really good fun and enjoyable. This one, I have to say, I felt like it could have done without this one. I felt like the Stir Calm Handshake ended on quite a neat, round note, and this kind of just dragged out the story a little bit. I didn't feel as enjoying of this one. I didn't feel as drawn into the world, and I felt like the end was a real disappointment. I know, you know, you're meant to go with your imagination and stuff like this, but I do like an end that's quite definite. Do you know what I mean? There's no room for doubt, and that wasn't what this was. I felt like almost there needs to be another book now to explain what actually happens, because we left it pretty much at quite a crucial point, really. But it was still enjoyable. I definitely recommend it, only for the first one, really, but this one was still worth a read, and I still enjoyed it, and it was nice being back in the world. And yeah, give it a go if you can find them. Then I read If I Stay by Gail Forman. I read this predominantly for research purposes, because I'm currently going to be writing a novel, writing a novel about a girl who suffers brain injuries and things and such. And this book, for those of you who haven't heard of it, which is probably most of you have heard of it because it seems to be doing the rounds at the moment. This book follows, it's basically Mia is in a car accident with her family and she goes into a coma. She then has to make the choice of whether to stay alive or die. And the book is pretty much her toying with the two ideas. She sort of almost has an out-of-body experience where she's walking around and seeing everyone grieving her, and, you know, she's watching her body in the bed in a coma and stuff. And I enjoyed it predominantly, I think, because it kind of resonated with me of my own book, and it was really interesting, as you can see, for just facts and things about general car accidents and what happens and the processes. So that was really useful for me. However, I think for most people it might be a bit of a like, if you actually think about it, it's quite a silly idea. The whole book is just her walking around, going over her life and thinking about why she should stay or why she should go. And I mean, it's a nice enough idea, but I think if it wasn't something that personally I was invested in at the moment, I wouldn't have been bothered and would have thought it was a bit weak. There is a film coming out of this, and this is actually the film cover. Normally I hate them, but this is really pretty and I really liked it. And purposefully hunted out the film cover for like the first time ever. It'll be interesting to see what the film's like, but again, I think it's probably going to be a bit weak because it is predominantly quite a weak premise. But I enjoyed it. I would say give it a read. It's a nice, easy read. There's not too much writing to a page, and it's not too long. So yeah. Then I read Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. Now, I feel like before I go into my review of this, I'm probably doing it an injustice because I read it at a time when I'm not concentrating on my reading this week. You know, it's been everything happening with the house and all the excitement of that, so I haven't really been paying as much attention to my reading as I should, and therefore I've been reading this, and at points I'm just like, how did we get here? I don't even know, and having to go back. And I know it's my own fault because I'm not concentrating, but alas, I have to give you an honest review of this, and I was very disappointed. I didn't read this as a child. It's the proper book version. I didn't read this as a child. I think I had a Peter Pan picture book, but that's a bit different. And I sort of had really high hopes for this, that it was going to be like a really revolutionary child book that is just beautifully written and really speaks to you as an adult, and it didn't necessarily actually. Peter is a dick. We all know that. He's not a nice character. It makes you realise, though, in like the Disney versions, they try and make out like he's quite sexy and mysterious and, you know, dreamy. He's not. He's really selfish. He just leaves her at the end. Why would you do that? If you love her, stay with her. You know, it's not romantic. He is selfish and just a typical boy. Anyway, there was some nice little bits, especially towards the end. There's a nice little bit about mothers and how, you know, they're always going to put their children first, and it's sickly and blah. And I think that's really sweet. But generally it was quite meh. I didn't love it. I think if I'd read it as a child, I would have found it really boring. It's quite wordy. It is a classic, though. I think it was published in 1914. So, gotta be forgiving of the wordiness. But yeah, I didn't love it. I was a bit disappointed. I think I'll probably reread it at another point in life because everything's up in air at the moment, and I think I gave it an injustice in not enjoying it. But there we go. Right, bye.